The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
I've spent the past month in Washington, D.C., and it is terrific to be back in America.
What a cheap shot that was. Welcome back to Harbaugh. Ted Cruz came home to a hero's welcome in Texas, as you saw last week. The only thing he achieved in Washington, however, was become the leader of a failed strategy that left his party with plunging poll numbers, as we know, and its House majority actually in peril next year. Nonetheless, Cruz took a victory lap around the Lone Star State, where he was greeted with welcome home rallies and a series of public appearances surrounded by cheering audiences for, as one supporter said, going to the mats. Well, under Cruz's influence, Republicans in Texas are lurching further and further to the right to win primaries and making dramatic appeals to do it, calling for the impeachment of President Obama, proposing that states like New York and California secede from the Union, calling for a rollback of the 17th Amendment that allows for popular election of U.S. senators, and opposing benefits for illegal immigrants, as well as anti-discrimination laws. Well, if successful, could Cruz's influence expand to the Republican Party nationally? And more so, could we see an attempt to replicate this strategy and do to America what he's done to Texas? Willie Brown was mayor of San Francisco, and Joan Walsh is an editor at Salon and an MSNBC political analyst. Let me go to the mayor, who always sharpens the issue. Mayor Brown, this Cruzism, if you will, is a different strain than what we've seen. This fella has declared war on Washington, which he considers foreign territory. People around him consider California now foreign territory. They're talking about getting your state out of the Union, getting New York out of the Union. I realize this is rhetoric, but what does it mean actually to the people who are cheering it?
He's trying desperately to get the nomination of the Republican Party for 2016. He apparently believes that he needs to be as radical as he possibly can be with that collection of people that have been his traditional supporters. And he hopes to somehow marshal Texas in that vein. This is a guy, Chris, who is incredibly smart by his own assessment. He ran into, however, equally smart people on the floor of the Senate and in the House in this last struggle, but he's come away making his people think that, in fact, that collection of people did not know what they were doing and what they're talking about. And for him, it's working. He's getting more contributions and more attention than he's ever gotten in his life.
Do you think he loves Texas even more so for the reason you left it?
I think his love affair with Texas is the love of convenience, nothing else.
Yeah. Let me go to Joan on this. You're also a Californian from the northern part of the state, and it is unusual because Barry Goldwater got in big trouble, and he was not a bad person. He was just a man of the frontier west who was a total libertarian. He got into trouble for giving the face of scariness to his party by being the guy who was, by saying, I want the generals in the field to decide when to use nuclear weapons or not. And everybody, oh my God, he's giving the military the decision, giving them the black bag, the football. They decide when to go to nuclear war. That's what killed him, I think. Killed him with the country. Right now we have a guy who's almost as explosive in terms of bring down the government, bring down our national debt. Let's go default. Anything goes in my lexicon of weapons.
Well, and I think, you know, if he ever got the Republican nomination, Chris, he would lead to the same outcome that the Republicans suffered in 1964. It would be a profound drubbing. But the danger here, it's interesting because a lot of us blue state people from California or New York, sometimes we turn up our noses at Texas, and sometimes we say, oh, they're a bunch of crackpots, let them secede. And yes, they have their secessionists, they have their McCarthyites, they've got their crazies. But Texas is really a microcosm of the United States, and the America that is struggling.
It is?
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. The America that is struggling to be born is also being born in Texas.
Oh, I see. Demographically,
demographically,
sure, but not
politically, and you know, in the cities politically. And there's a rising power of Latinos. If we had the Latino population of Texas voting in the numbers that they do vote in California and New York, Texas would be more purple. Texas is a purple state. We just can't can't quite see it yet. And you're going to have the candidacy of Wendy Davis creating this great alliance between Latinos, women, young people. It may not be enough to do it, but Ted Cruz is taking Texas, as well as the country, on a course of demographic suicide. It feels good. It feels good to those people who are terrified of what the country is becoming, but it's not going to be good for them in the long run.
Well, I remember what General Custer said to Cochise right before the Battle of Little Bighorn. He said, someday we're going to outnumber you. And he said, yeah, but not today. Okay, not today.
Not today. And that's what
and
it's all
now,
about.
Here's what's going on in Texas right now. Republicans running for office in Texas are vying to be the most Cruz-like and are making dramatic appeals to get the furthest to the right in Republican primaries. All four major GOP lieutenant governor candidates support repeal of the state's landmark 2001 law offering in-state college tuition to illegal immigrants, supported by Rick Perry back then. Well, Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, whom Cruz defeated in that primary, said that Obama should be impeached, not only for trampling, as he says, on our liberties, but what he did in Benghazi is just a crime. 3 candidates for Attorney General oppose a non-discrimination ordinance in San Antonio that includes protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. Well, Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst and one of his challengers both support repealing, catch this, repealing the 17th Amendment that called for popular elections of senators. They want them tied to the legislatures. And one of Dewhurst's opponents wants to expel, catch this, the liberal states of New York, California, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Jerry Patterson said, quote, just think about how different our country would be if New York and California weren't the tail wagging the door, and those other states. It's not America. Again, Mayor, going back to the use of the term America, it seems that in the lexicon of these people to mean white conservatives. I mean, that may be a too broad a definition. There's probably a narrower definition. How about white right-wingers? But they call that America. It's almost like one of those Afrikaner groups in South Africa that says, we're going to put the, the big lager around us and form a little town somewhere in Bloemfontein. These guys are unbelievable. Go ahead, Mayor. I'm sure you have an attitude about these guys.
They really are. But let me tell you, Chris, one of the odd things about Mr. Cruz is nobody has said a word about the fact that he was born in Canada. Can you imagine the conversation that will ultimately take place in the Republican world when they find out? Sure, in the Republican world. They will have a conversation on that issue. Obviously,
and he's Latino, too. The other part of me is Latino. His name's Rafael Edward Cruz, which normally might be a wait a minute here kind of thing with the Republicans, but no, that doesn't bother me. I think they make exceptions for their point of view politically.
Yeah, I do too.
I think they do. Joan, I think they're quite willing to accept anybody's papers, and I think he is a natural-born American because he was born to an American mother.
I wish we were going to see some integrity. Not that I wish, we as Democrats are open to the broadest spectrum of people participating. So I'm not going to become a birther about Ted Cruz. But if you had a little bit of intellectual and political consistency on the other side, there would be paranoia about this guy born in Canada. There's not going to be that because they don't have that kind of intellectual or political consistency or integrity. I'm
all for his background. I think it's a great American background, by the way.
American story.
Cuban-Irish, it's great. I think it would probably pretty much fun, actually, a group of people like that getting together. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, you think they're going to jump on this guy because of his... But you think they will jump on him out of the reason when they suspect or want to suspect the president was born in Kenya for some bizarre notion of history and conspiracy, that once they find out that he is in the worst-case scenario, that they'll jump him? Do you think they're that consistent?
I think the Republican Party is capable, literally, of having membership on every side of every issue on any given day. And believe me, I think when the fight really starts for that nomination, there's going to be somebody among the Republicans who are going to call him to task. And they're going to ask about all the things that are inconsistent with really good judgment. They're going to ask, why is it you wouldn't study when you're in law school with people who didn't graduate undergrad from Harvard or Yale or one of those places? How is it that you come off as being so superior to everybody else? That dialogue is going to take place. And just as it did in the Congress, Cruz is not going to be able to handle it. He
And
couldn't
What do you
handle
think? What do you
McConnell?
think that New York City immigration officer? I think his name is Donald Trump, who checks everybody's papers.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll have a consistent view when he emerges with an opinion on Ted Cruz?
Absolutely sure. I'm sure he's got his researchers. His guys are up in Canada right now looking for the real birth certificate.
You're
of
being
course
sarcastic.
not. Of course not, because this is a cover. This is a cover for race, and it always has been. They're not going to give Ted Cruz a hard time about it. I don't think. The mayor could be right. He knows more than I do.
Right. By the way, I think there's a lot of people on the hard right who think that Canada is more of a white country, more like us, America, as they see it, and
Right.
Hawaii is always suspect a bit. Last thought from you, Mayor Brown.
I think that don't underestimate the potential for the purple nature of Texas to reveal itself in the next election. In
right.
spite of what Ted Cruz is doing.
Please
I'm
register
telling
out
you,
there and
people
please
are there.
vote.
Yes.
All Americans should vote. They should register and vote, and you'll have power. Without it, you won't. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, John Walsh.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.